Day in, day out, I hear the words sugar addiction, but does sugar addiction simply mean addicted to sugar? Joining us today to talk about the subject matter is One Kim. One, it's always a pleasure having you here. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure to be here as well.
One, what is sugar addiction? How would you define sugar addiction in your own words?
Sure. So, full disclosure, I'm not an expert on sugar addiction, but for the viewers, I did start studying about health nonstop since July 2023 when my wife was diagnosed with a breast cancer. Since that time, I've read maybe 50 different authors or more, gone through thousands of hours of lectures, read at least 1,000 papers, and along the way, I did read a few books that I thought were really, really helpful, and that actually, to me, explains what sugar addiction is. And so, some of the books I read that had nothing to do with cancer on the title were the most helpful, and the particular books that really helped tie everything in was The Plant Paradox by Stephen Gundry and The Longevity Paradox, which was published the following year. And then most recently was Gut Check. So this was a series of 3 books that Dr. Gundry had written about the gut microbiome. And the way he explained everything to me, as I recollect, is that our gut really controls everything that we do in a sense, because there is something called the vagus nerve that is connecting the brain to the gut. So people have always thought that the brain is trying to control the gut with this vagus nerve, but Dr. Gundry tries to point out that it's the other way around. It's the gut that actually controls the brain through the vagus nerve. That's more likely. So we have in our gut good bacteria and bad bacteria. And when we have too much of the bad bacteria, we have something called dysbiosis, and things start to fall apart. So the way we want to think about it is the good bugs are like the good tenants in a building. Our body is the building. If we do things that are helpful to the good tenants, they will upkeep the home. They'll clean up. They'll try to make their home nice so that they can stay there longer. So they want our body to function well and live a long life because our body is their home. What a sugar addiction is when we consume way too many of the bad things and we kill off all the good bugs, too much of the good bugs. There's something called a bad bug that's also a fungus called Candida albicans. And when we have an overgrowth of some of the bad bugs, including Candida albicans, now they start calling their shots and they start telling us what they want to eat. And part of what they want to eat, well, what they want to eat is sugar. So, and that's all they want to eat because they just want to grow and multiply, take over the whole body. So that's the sugar addiction in a nutshell.
Why do you think some people develop sugar addiction and others don't?
Well, I think it's just our diet. I mean, we start out eating things without thinking about it as a kid. We'll have that cake, we'll eat that donut, we'll have that soda. There's sugar in day-to-day life for a lot of people. I used to drink Coca-Cola every single day after work. On my way home, I'd get a 20-ounce Coca-Cola and I would just drink just one bottle. That would be it. But there's high fructose corn syrup in there, which is not just a sugar, but it's an artificial super sugar. It was created in the early 60s in a lab using corn syrup, which is less expensive than sugar cane, but then they used the process to make it even less expensive. And now it's made its way into everything we consume, all the products that we buy. The ketchup that we buy in the grocery store aisle has high fructose corn syrup, and it's just a very, very concentrated form of sugar. And I think that it's damaging the whole body and creating the sugar addiction.
What are your thoughts on the idea that sugar can be as addictive as drugs or alcohol?
I think it's probably one of the most addictive substances there are, and the dangers are that we consume it without really thinking twice about it. When somebody decides to use one of those other substances, I think there is a little bit of awareness that, okay, this is a risky substance and I'm taking something I shouldn't be taking. But when somebody eats a donut and has a coffee or has a soda, a fountain soda, to them it might just be normal part of the day. And so I think it's more dangerous to have just regular sugar consumption. And I think it can be more addictive because we don't even realize it's an addiction itself.
Right. So In your opinion, do you believe that sugar addiction is a real condition or is it more of a behavioral issue?
I would say physiologically, it's a real condition. So when Candida albicans overgrows and it takes over, now it's got more influence on the brain than the good bugs or the other bad bugs that can be in the gut microbiome. It is an actual physiological condition and it is an actual addiction.
Yes, and I strongly believe that too. That puts my thoughts in the direction of how sugar is marketed. So I was going to ask, have you noticed how sugar is marketed or consumed in society? What stands out to you when you look at how the marketing of sugar is put out there or perceived as? Because at the moment, it's not just sugar per se, it is all the things man made or processed, ultra processed, that breaks down into sugar.
Mm.
Right. So, have you noticed how sugar is marketed or consumed in society and what stands out to you?
I'm more aware of all the things that we metabolize as sugar because for my wife, we want to avoid sugar as much as possible. Why? Because cancer cell loves to feed off of sugar. It's using a process of sugar fermentation. It takes 15 times more sugar than a healthy cell in order to survive and replicate itself. So we do know that it likes iron, it likes sugar, it likes glutamine. So when we eat a carbohydrate, even if it's a vegetable, for instance, even if it's a potato, it's going to metabolize as sugar. We drink an alcoholic beverage, it metabolizes kind of like sugar. It acts like a sugar.
Mhm.
And if you eat bread, a refined carb, it definitely metabolizes into sugar. So these are all the things that we have to watch out for. But then I start noticing everybody just consuming sugar every day around me. So the marketing, I think it's just abundant. Everything that we see has sugar in it. And I want to bring up a book that I read called The Great Cholesterol Myth, written by two doctors and two nutrition specialists. They did cite an instance where there was a paper released by the WHO, which was talking about the effect of sugar on the body. But then the authors referenced a sugar lobby, and I didn't look into that sugar lobby, but apparently the sugar lobby is so strong that they were able to influence the WHO into calling back the paper.
Wow.
And
No
until
way.
I read this, I had no idea there was such a thing as a sugar lobby. I haven't verified it, but I mean, maybe sugar is a big industry. That's something worth people to look into.
Wow. The sugar industry is a huge industry.
Mm,
And I know it's an obvious answer to the question I'm about to ask, but
mm,
aside from the fact that people's taste buds are used to sugary foods because that is what is pushed at the moment when it comes to ketchup and even peanut butter and things
mm.
that you don't expect sugar to be in, they do have some amounts of sugar. And with all the refined and ultra processed foods, like you were mentioning, they all break down to sugar. But why do you think sugary foods and drinks are so popular worldwide? I know that most people will say, well, duh, the taste, right? But why do you think they have been so successful with the marketing of sugary foods and drinks? And why is it so popular worldwide?
That's a really good question. I don't know. First thing I want to say is it tastes good. It makes the person feel good. So it's very,
Right.
very easy to get somebody hooked, and they just need to take a little bit of it. And then once it starts taking over the body, I mean, the
Mhm.
marketing is done for you inside a person's body. It's just an easy thing to push. And once you push it, that it just keeps perpetuating.
Yeah, that's right. And I believe very strongly that when you take in sugar, it stimulates that part of the brain that is happy, the happy brain.
Hmm.
So I feel like that is what makes people want to take it in some more because there's this feeling of satisfaction when it's taken. So do you think, I know we touched on this earlier, but do you think processed foods play a role in the increasing sugar consumption?
Absolutely. I mean, I have heard this phrase or comment. If you go to McDonald's and you give a kid a giant soda, do they eat less of the McDonald's or they eat more of it? So what we understand is when you take in that much sugar, the person doesn't know when to stop eating. I think it increases the hunger. And so this is a good way to market and promote fast food. Like I used to eat
Mm,
fast food. I remember when I used to eat fast food, I used to not think twice about it. And I was a I still am pretty lightweight, but when
mm,
I go into McDonald's, for some reason, I would never feel full. I could drink that fountain
yeah.
soda. I'd have the Big Mac, then I'd have a 20-piece nuggets, and then I also have a small cheeseburger, maybe two of them. And I would feel just normal. And I would eat the French fries and I would feel hungry. But I didn't know why it would only happen when I went into a fast food place. If I had normal food, I would feel full very quickly.
When I used to eat fast food, I think the crazy thing is I'm still trying to understand how you never feel full
Mm,
when you eat fast foods because I don't know what it is. I think I read somewhere that they put this chemical in it that never gives you that feeling of satiety.
right.
So you'll keep eating, and the sugar stimulates that part of the happy brain. So you're excited and you feel relaxed, you feel happy. But then after that, there is this crash that leads to a state of depression. I
Mm,
read that somewhere, I don't remember where, but I'm beginning to believe that it is absolutely true. I have heard countless times from not just one person, oh, I tried this diet, but then I wanted to taste some fast food. I went to
mm,
get it, and after that, I felt so bad that I
yeah.
took it in. So I'm beginning to think that that is absolutely true.
Yes.
That it does stimulate that part of the happy brain, but then when
Mm,
it's out of our system, we still fall back into that state of sadness and depression, and reality kicks in. So it's
yeah.
sort of like a drug.
I think so.
If
I
you
think
think about
maybe it induces the dopamine, and then one good thing, one only positive thing is that sugar can help reduce stress hormones. So I noticed that sometimes people, when they had a rough day or they're stressed out, they do crave something sugary. They want to have a pastry or piece of
yes.
cake, and it makes them feel better. So I think that's
Mhm.
one of the other reasons that we tend to eat so much sugar as society.
Yeah, I believe that. I definitely believe that. Have you observed changes in attitudes towards sugar in recent years? For instance, when it comes to trends in health and
Mm.
wellness, because I know the sugar craze is there where everyone is talking about reducing the sugar, but have you observed any changes in attitudes, whether personal, whether collectively, towards
I think
sugar?
so. I think so because when I was consciously trying to buy products that had less sugar or no sugar, I started being more aware of the products that were available. And there's not a lot of products that truly don't have sugar in it. It's just made with natural
Right.
ingredients.
Mhm.
But there are certain products like that, which I was happy about. The other side of that spectrum are the sugar simulation, the fake sugar. Those are also a problem too, I think, because
Yes.
people don't realize what kind of damage they're doing into the body when they're taking in those particular chemicals that actually are cancer accelerators, like aspartate and aspartame. And
Mm,
I think maybe things like Splenda, these things, when we consume it, the body doesn't know what they are. They don't know how to,
yeah.
the body doesn't know how to process it. So where does this get stored? Naturally, it's going to turn into fat. So the
Mhm.
sugar-free movement using sugar substitutes is actually making people more obese, I think.
Yeah, and I've come to believe that when I began my journey, sugar substitutes was one thing that I couldn't go without.
Hmm.
And I feel like at the time I was probably addicted to sugar. Even though I wanted to cut out the refined sugar, whether it was raw sugar, whatever it was, the carbs, I realized that I was using stevia a lot.
Yeah.
And with the stevia, I came to realize that if you're using the raw plant, that is
Mm,
different. It's safer. But I noticed that the one I was buying from Walmart, for instance,
yeah.
had maltodextrin in
Yes.
there, which is terrible for the body. At the time, I did not know that until
Mm,
I did my due diligence and then did the research. I used to wonder, I was like, why can't it just contain stevia? Why does it
mm,
have to have maltodextrin? And I read about maltodextrin and all the damages it does to the body, the brain, everything. And so I had a big pack of of stevia, which had maltodextrin in it, that I just threw away, put in the trash because I
Yeah.
did not want to consume. And since then, if I don't get the stevia plant itself or anything that says stevia on its own, I was not putting it in my drinks or my food. It came to the point where I felt good enough and I felt like I was able to cut it out of my lifestyle and my diet completely, my nutrition.
Sure.
So now I don't even use any sugar substitutes. But
Great.
the transition between you being addicted to sugar and you trying to live a healthy lifestyle, yes, it may help within that period. And we are not saying that if anybody is consuming sugar substitutes, they should throw it out. But what I'm saying is it can be a challenge if you're coming from the point where you have been consuming large amounts of carbohydrates and refined and processed foods and refined sugars. So if even you're using it as a transition, it's always better to get to the point where you want to eliminate it from
Yes.
your diet.
Right.
Do you think sugar addiction is taken seriously enough by individuals or healthcare professionals? Why and why not?
I don't think it's taken seriously at all. I think the example you just gave where stevia is being sold with maltodextrin. Sugar, if we look it up, it has so many different names. Maltodextrin is the sugar as well. There's maltodextrin, there's dextrose, there's
Yeah.
sucrose, there's fructose. And so people don't necessarily realize they're putting sugar in their body. And all the supplements that I use with my wife, sometimes when I look at the ingredients, sometimes the maltodextrin snuck its way in. So I had
Mm-hmm.
to change recently. This particular probiotic was Bacillus coagulans that we used, but it had maltodextrin and I had to remove it. But it gives us a sugar spike. So it's counterintuitive to use a sugar substitute that has sugar in it. And
Mm.
so I don't think it's taken seriously at all. And I think it's just easy to kind of sweep it under the rug and say it's not there because it's
Yeah.
people get addicted and they're going to consume it. And I think it's a good business, I would say.
Yes, I believe it's good business. And that's why throughout my journey, I don't think sugar addiction was taken very seriously. I mean, I met a few professionals who told me quite frankly and bluntly, if you don't do this, if you don't do something about your health, you'll not live to see your babies grow.
Yeah.
And till this day, I appreciate a professional who said that to me. That was the beginning of my journey because I wanted to see my babies grow.
Yeah.
But for the most part, for the rest of the professionals, it's like, oh, well, there's really nothing much you can do about it. Just do what you can. And later, when I thought about it, it got me mad and upset because I used to say to myself, this is a life and death situation. It was a life and death situation, but it was treated as though it was just another common cold or just another feeling that I was
Mhm.
feeling instead of me being told direct. And I guess to a certain degree, it's not their fault because sometimes people don't want to hear the truth,
Mhm.
but the truth is the truth. And it was a matter of life and death for me. I really do appreciate the professional who came out to just state it as it was because that was the absolute truth.
Yes.
And if I hadn't done something about it, only God knows where I would be right now.
Yeah.
It's very important that professionals get to the point where they're absolutely frank with their patients. I agree, it's not taken seriously because now we think a lot about how the patient will feel, what they are feeling. They may not take it very lightly. And like you said, it's good business for the
Mhm.
industry. So they would rather recommend sugar substitutes because
Mhm.
it's also in the business than rather tell you, stop taking this, don't do this, don't
Right.
take that. I completely agree. Have you seen anyone in your life struggle with sugar addiction? And what was your perspective on their experience?
I don't know for sure that I've seen people who I've identified consciously as, oh, this person has a sugar addiction, but I do know that I met a lot of people who have diabetes and heart disease, high blood pressure, cancer, and I think that can all be attributed to sugar consumption. In
Mhm.
part, is one of the worst things that we can consume in our body. And I think we said good business. I think we want to say profitable business. We don't want to say it's a good business because you can have a good
Right.
business that's well intentioned. I wanted to correct myself there. I did want to point out something. A week ago, I saw an advertisement
Mhm.
for water. It's you take a little tablet, you put it into water, and it's like a cola. They said it tastes like cola, but it's actually
Mhm.
healthy for you because it's got vitamins and it has all these good ingredients. So I was curious. Oh, maybe I can. I haven't had cola in so long. Maybe I want to try this. So I looked at the ingredients, and it has something called sucralose, and sucralose
Mm.
is the chemical that they use in Splenda. So I got curious and I looked at the side effects of sucralose, and it says it affects your immune system negatively. It destroys the gut health. It causes inflammation, cardiovascular disease, and makes us gain weight. So here I am going, oh my God, these people are buying this particular product because they think it's a healthy cola. Meanwhile, it's just as bad.
Exactly.
So I think that sugar substitutes can be very, very harmful to the body. And I also want to point out when I read Dr. Gundry's book, he did mention that even when we take something sweet that's not sugar, it may trigger the brain to thinking, oh, there's something sweet coming in. The brain doesn't know that it's not actually sugar, and it signals the body to store this energy, store more fat. So just by eating something too sweet, sugar or not, it can actually make us gain weight. So that's something that I think we need to be aware of.
That's right. Just going back, talking about people struggling with sugar addiction. We don't like calling it sugar addiction, but
Mm,
that is exactly what it is. You
yeah.
can be addicted to sugar. I have seen people in my life struggle with sugar addiction. And let me put it out there that sometimes I don't fully blame the individuals because of the way our food system is now, what is marketed as healthy. Because somebody may want to even eat healthy, but if you look at what is marketed as healthy and you actually take the bottle or the container and you look at the ingredients in there, there is nothing healthy about it. A lot of people don't look at the labels, even though there is information out there about people checking their labels more. Prior to my journey, I never really looked at labels. During my journey, when I was researching, I had an epiphany about breakfast.
Mm,
Breakfast simply means break your fast.
yes.
Basically, that's what it is. And the reason why professionals say it's the most important meal of the day is because what you put into your body after you break your fast is what
Mm,
sets your tone for the day. That is
yeah.
what feeds your gut microbiome. That is what sends nutrients to your brain to actually carry you through the day. And that is why it's the most important meal for the day. But that does not mean that it should necessarily be eaten at a certain time. And this is purely my opinion from the
Mm,
research that I have done. It doesn't have to be at a certain time, it doesn't have to be at a certain period, it doesn't have to be a cereal or bacon and eggs. Bacon and eggs are okay, but bacon is one of the terrible things for us. But then it's advertised, the cereals, the type of chemicals and sugar in our cereals that are advertised as a healthy breakfast that we can feed our children with. I don't buy cereals to my house anymore. I don't allow my kids to eat cereal because when you look at the chemicals and the sugar and the toxins that are in it, that is not a healthy way to break your fast.
right.
But like you said, correcting yourself, and I'm going to
Mm,
correct myself, it's a
mm,
profitable industry, profitable business. So then it's advertised, oh, have a glass of orange juice. No, eat a whole orange where you can
right.
get the
Oh,
fiber to
yes.
counter the sugar. That way, the sugar is not absorbed directly into your bloodstream. Eat an apple, or better still, break your fast with vegetables so you don't get a blood sugar spike. But
Right.
we are breaking our fast with bacon and ham and toast with butter and cereal, and it's advertised. And I blame fully the food industry because whatever that is advertised and said by professionals that is healthy is what the population will consume. And at this point, what is being advertised as healthy is what is killing us.
Yeah.
Is this supposed to help us, or is this
Mm.
supposed to reduce our population by killing us? But anyway, that was
Yeah, I
just
mean,
by the way.
it's interesting you say that because growing up, I used to eat cereal in the morning, and I remember I used to feel really bad every
Mm.
time I had that cereal. I had a little clump of cereal in a mug of milk, and I used to really, really not enjoy this whatsoever. So when I grew up and I was living on my own, I promised myself I'll never eat that. So I used to skip breakfast all the time.
Mm.
And mind you, I was a regular smoker, so I would smoke half a pack to a pack a day. So sometimes I would feel pretty bad anyways. But I remember on certain occasions when we would have company conferences, we'd have to go there at a certain time. It'd be at a hotel and they would serve breakfast. And I'm always told, oh, Juan, you don't look healthy. You don't eat enough. You're too thin. You need to eat more. You need to eat more to become healthy.
Mhm.
So those days I would have a breakfast. I would have the orange juice. I would have the toast, the bacon, whatever that they were serving. And those days I would feel the worst in my life. And I didn't know why that was happening. But now I understand it more because that orange juice we drink thinking it's very healthy, it's actually a sugar bomb because it's
Yeah.
removed most of the
Yeah.
fiber that helps slow down the sugar absorption. And we're drinking most of the fructose or fructose. That actually is one of the most damaging forms of sugar. In Dr. Gundry's 3 books, he does talk about fruit. He gets a lot of criticism for fruit because, first of all, fruit is very, very healthy for many different reasons. It contains anthocyanins, it contains bioflavonoids that are extremely protective of the body. There are so many good things in the fruit itself that we do want to take advantage of. But I think people sometimes confuse the healthy ingredients in the fruit and the sugar in the fruit. They're not the
Mhm.
same thing. So, when we look at white table sugar, it's roughly half fruit sugar. There's sucrose and fructose. I don't remember the exact percentage, but I think it's 40% sucrose and the rest is fructose, or maybe I have that flipped. But
Mhm.
when we consume fructose, it goes straight to the liver. It's converted almost immediately into triglycerides. So when we have a blood test and we have high triglycerides, it might be because we're consuming too much fructose, whether it's from fruit or maybe other products that have it. It depends on the individual. The other part of it goes to our kidneys as uric acid, and it actually affects the kidney systems and how they try to detoxify the body. And so the kidneys do get affected by that. So in Dr. Gundry's books, he's talking about how fruit is really good for us, but we shouldn't be consuming it all year round because if you look, our ancestors didn't have fruit growing 365 days a year, depending on where we live. They grow
Exactly.
when they're in season. So when it's in the month of December, we're in the Northeast and we have pineapples at the supermarket. Where are these pineapples coming from? Well, they're coming from regions of the world where they are in season. But what is the problem is if we pluck the fruit too early, they're actually, when they're not ripe, they have more of the lectins that are designed to fend off insects that chew on it. It's designed to paralyze these little pesky insects that want to feed on it. So
Mhm.
when we pluck the fruit off early, what happens is they're chemically treated so that while they're being shipped to a faraway destination, that they don't get too ripe and go bad. So we're slowing down the ripening process chemically, and then once it gets to their destination, it can be recolored, like in the case of an orange, for instance, stored and then sold. By the time we consume it, it might no longer have the nutrients that we want to have. So it's important that we eat fruit that's in season and that it's grown locally. So that's something that we want to be mindful of. And then I think that we don't want to say don't eat fruit because fruit is very, very good for the body. So there are
Yeah.
people eating Snickers and chocolate and McDonald's. And
Mhm.
we don't want those people to say, I'm just going to keep eating what I'm eating because I'm told that certain fruits are bad for us. So we do want to
Mhm.
encourage people to eat fruit, but just be a little more aware that we want to eat things that are actually good for us.
And talking about fruit, naturally, fruit is higher, even though it's natural sugars,
Mm-hmm.
it's higher in sugar than vegetables, for instance. So,
Mm-hmm.
if even you're going for fruits, especially if you live a sedentary lifestyle, you're not very active, you don't want to go for high glycemic index fruits where it'll be sitting in your system without you using it. You want to go for
Right.
low glycemic index fruits. And even with a low glycemic index fruits, like all the berries, every kind of
Mm-hmm.
berry, an orange, a grapefruit, those are low glycemic index fruits that you can enjoy, like an apple. But even with those, even though they are low glycemic, you still want to control how much of it you eat, because I remember during my journey, I always like to break my fast with vegetables. And sometimes chewing it can be difficult. I wouldn't like, can be challenging. So
Yeah.
I usually make smoothies, and that has actually helped me a lot in my journey. Now, eating the whole vegetable, eating the whole fruit is better, But
Mhm.
if it is a little challenging, making it into a smoothie is also okay, even though
Yes.
it's not as good as eating the whole fruit or eating the
Sure.
whole vegetables. During my journey, smoothies helped me a lot.
Mhm.
I would put in some kale, some spinach. I will add a kiwi, all low glycemic index fruits. But I noticed that the days that I added strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, an apple, an orange, the days where I added 3 or 4 fruits, my
Mhm.
blood sugar would still spike. It didn't matter. It would spike. And even though the spike was more gradual as compared to eating processed or ultra processed sugars, it still had that spike.
Yeah.
And it went down gradually, but
Mhm.
it was only able to come back to normal if I didn't eat the rest of the day.
Mhm.
If I ate the rest of the day, there came another serious spike. But I noticed that the days where I had my kale and my spinach smoothie, and I like them frozen, so I freeze my kale. It's the best way to make a smoothie, by the way.
Yeah.
When you freeze the kale and the spinach, it's way better than when it's fresh. The days that I added one fruit, like added one kiwi, one berry, one fruit, that spike was so subtle. That is what made me realize that yeah, the fruits, they are good too and they contain the fiber, but the sugar is still there.
Yes.
And it's natural sugar, but
Mhm.
it's still there. It's like eating sugar cane on the stick
Yeah.
and saying that, oh, it's natural, so I'm going to eat as much as I can. It's still all sugar.
Right. Well, with the sugar cane, it's really difficult to consume that way because of all the fiber that's getting in the way. So what society has done is to extract that sugar so that it's easier to consume. And I
Yes.
like your point about the fruit because the fruit has all that fiber that helps slow down the sugar absorption. This is why it's so good to eat the whole fruit. And then why some doctors and professionals recommend something called reverse juicing. And so that's a process where we're trying to remove all of the fructose from the fruit and then eating what's left over so that you get all of these great bioflavonoids, the anthocyanins, and we put that into the body, which is super, super helpful. And so I know some people, they swear by juicing, and Chris Beats Cancer is a book written by Chris Wark, and he is a big proponent of juicing. And he has legions of fans that believe in that. He has shared his personal experience, but they do a lot of juicing, and unfortunately, it doesn't work for everybody.
Right.
And there are people who think that they must drink all that juice every single day. They believe that they should not have any fat or oil in their system because they were told to by a certain individual who has success. And they're presented with research that says how when you have too much oil in the body, that somehow it affects the way that the body uses the glucose, which is actually
Right.
describing to me ketosis when we switch over to ketosis. But it was kind of skewed to say, here you go, you should never have any fat whatsoever. Fat
Oh, wow.
makes it difficult for the body to use sugar. But I think that the good fat which induces ketosis, that's
Mhm.
what's actually happening. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think that getting back on topic of sugar, the sugar is natural, it comes from nature, but it's just how
Yeah.
is it processed and how do we eat it? And
Mhm.
then when we think, oh, it's natural because it's a fruit, we can have unlimited quantities. I think that's our mistake. If we look at a ripe banana, it has way more sugar than a green banana. So I will
Mhm.
only eat a green banana. I always like to taste the green bananas. Most people don't like it. I actually like it.
Yeah.
So I'll eat a green banana. Apples these days, when we look at them, they're raised to be much bigger and sweeter. So if you look
Mm.
at a name like Honey Crisp Apple, it didn't exist, I think, 50, 60, 70 years ago. The apples used to be smaller and more bitter. So now we're kind of growing them to be bigger and sweeter so that people would,
Modifying them.
yes, modifying them. And so we have to be mindful of that. Also, grapes. These days, when we buy grapes at the supermarket, there are no seeds most of the time, and
Yeah.
what is that grape that's really small is named after? It's a word candy in the name, I think, and
And some of them are even labeled seedless. I'm not
seedless.
sure if that existed 50 years ago, but yeah, there are a lot of
Right.
seedless grapes out there.
Mostly seedless now, but the thing about grapes are the best part of the grapes are in the grape seed and the skin. So
Mm.
the skin is where we get resveratrol from, which is a really powerful antioxidant, and it helps cancer patients. Same with grapeseed extract. If we grind up the seed and we make the extract, this is very, very strong as an antioxidant and cancer preventative. I've been taking grapeseed extract since I was in my early 20s, so for many,
No.
many years now. And there are very different versions of it. You can do a lot of research on it, but I think grapeseed extract is very helpful. But the rest of the grape is just sugar with some fiber.
Yeah.
And there's not much fiber inside the actual tasty part of the grape. So we want to be mindful of that. And also all of the pesticides that go on the fruit, a lot of it's on the grape skin. So it's really difficult
Right.
to reap the benefits of the fruit as it was intended.
Yeah, in our society today, it's really difficult if you want to stay healthy because everything has some type of toxin. If
Mm,
you want to buy organic all the time for an average person who earns regular income, that is not sustainable. If you want to get the regular ones, you can't run away from the pesticides and all the chemicals that are sprayed on it. If it's just our society today makes it so difficult to stay healthy. And just to take us back on the topic of juicing, I wanted to say that juicing has been proven to help a lot of people, but I believe that whoever chooses to go the juicing route, you should know the lifestyle that you are leading. Because if you live a sedentary lifestyle, juicing may not be as beneficial as you want it to be because you're not burning it off. You're not burning off the extra sugar because once you juice it, you've taken out majority of the fiber. And if you live a sedentary lifestyle, for instance, the fiber is what you need. You
yes.
need a lot of the fiber to combat or to slow down the process of that sugar being absorbed into your bloodstream. So I was very wary of juicing on my journey because I knew that I couldn't work out necessarily to burn it off. And the nature of my job, the lifestyle that I lived a sedentary lifestyle. And with the chronic diseases that I was diagnosed with, especially with a herniated disc, I wasn't about to get up and run a mile.
Yes.
So I was very careful with juicing. I would say absolutely, if you can and it's available to you, eat the whole fruit or the vegetable, but just be careful with the amount of fruit that you take and the fact that it is good for you. You can see somebody pulling weights and pushing heavy things and lifting the heavy dumbbells, juicing and eating a whole bunch of fruit and they are fine because they are burning it off. But if you're like me, you're sitting behind a desk all day trying to get some work done, running after the kids, trying to get your life together, you cannot consume all that fruit or make that fruit into a juice and think that it will be okay. So you really need to know the lifestyle that you are living to choose what works best for you. The more active
Mm,
you are, the more beneficial I believe the juicing is. But the less active you are, go for the whole fruit. If the whole fruit, or go for the whole vegetable. If the whole vegetable is too much, make it into a smoothie. Get creative.
yeah.
Drink those nutrients. And if you
Yes.
get a powerful blender, it can actually blend it to the point where the smoothie actually tastes like juice, but then you
Yes.
still have all the powerful antioxidants and all the fiber and everything you need in there.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think we do know people who have suffered chronic conditions, but they have incorporated juicing into their lifestyle. They have seen improvements over time, so they really, really swear by the juicing. And I feel for them. And as a bystander, I can tell why certain things
Mhm.
improve when you're drinking juice because, as I mentioned, you're ingesting potentially polyphenols, antioxidants into the body, vitamins, essential nutrients that are coming into the body that's going to help you become healthier. But then you're attributing some of these benefits to the juice itself. Yet, I think you're getting benefits because of those things that are good in the fruit, but you're also harming yourself with all the fructose that you're
Mhm.
consuming at the same time. So, yes, absolutely, it works, it helps, but it also harms to a degree. So, why not change it a little bit? Continue to use all of the good ingredients in the fruit, but take it in a way that's actually more beneficial for the body. So, that's what I would encourage someone to do If they are swearing by the juicing, why I'm happy you've come this far, you're doing so well, but maybe we want to look into that a little bit more and see how you can optimize it for our body.
Just knowing where you are and looking at what would give you the maximum benefits is the way to go. One, I know this is a very obvious question, the question I'm about to ask, but how do you think sugar addiction impacts public health on a large scale?
I think that we see it every day. We have increasing rates of obesity. We have all kinds of diseases. I think that it is very, very detrimental to society. I think we got to talk about glycation. What is the sugar doing to the body besides it's bad for us, it's bad for us? How is it actually bad for us? Well, when we have excess sugar in the body, the sugar molecules bind to the protein molecules and they form the plaque in our arteries. And so when we have plaque in the arteries, what happens is that the cells are no longer receiving the nutrients and oxygens they want because the arteries have become hardened. And so what is the solution? The cell signals to the brain, please increase that pressure, the blood pressure, so we can get more of the oxygen and nutrients. So the brain sends a signal to the heart to say you need to use more pressure because the cells need more help. And this is why our blood pressure goes up. So sugar is at the core of cardiovascular disease. It's causing the plaquing. It's causing the high blood pressure. It's also very much linked with diabetes because when we have too much sugar in our system and the body can't deal with it, we develop diabetes. So
Mm.
it is very, very common where people have diabetes and then after that they have heart disease or high blood pressure. And then after they've had high blood pressure for a long time, then they have more problems in the heart that's starting to break down because of all the chemicals that the doctors are telling us we need to take to control that pressure. When what we really need to do is cut out that sugar and clean up those arteries.
Right. And it's interesting that you say that because high blood pressure is never really associated with sugar.
Yeah.
It's not. But that's one thing I found
Mm,
out that was an aha moment for me.
yeah.
Even though high blood pressure is talked about, it's always associated with the trans fats
Mhm.
and the fats and all the other things except for sugar. But
Yes.
the underlying fact is if your sugar is not controlled, you're at risk of potential heart risks and diseases.
Yes.
Thank
So
you
it's
for
it's
mentioning that.
yes, it's the sugar and the trans fat that is causing most of the harm in our body. Those are the two things we want to stay clear of. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, saturated fat got all the blame as being the cause. And they said saturated fat is the cause of all the problems, and that high
Yeah.
cholesterol is the cause of all the problems. And so I've been reading this book called The Great Cholesterol Myth. It's very technical and explains all of this. And it is a little bit unfortunate because in that process of glycation, when we have the plaquing in the arteries, now the arteries are hardening up. The body's response to that is to send more LDL cholesterol to the site of the accident because LDL cholesterol is very soft. It's like a waterproof bandage and it wants to provide more elasticity to the site where the plaquing is occurring. But what happens is the body thinks it's parked illegally, starts giving it parking tickets, and then the immune system attacks that LDL cholesterol, oxidizes it more, and then we have more plaquing. And so, what the scientists and doctors thought is that the LDL cholesterol was the cause of everything, but what the cause of everything was actually the sugar, the glycation that happens when the sugar molecules bind to the protein molecules, and is worsened with the trans fat that we consume. The cholesterol itself wasn't actually the cause, but this is a big industry where statin drugs are prescribed to bring our cholesterol down. The sad thing is when we have oxidized LDL in the arteries, the LDL cholesterol levels are not going to be shown as being high, which is why a lot of people with cardiovascular disease have low cholesterol. And so when somebody goes over 200, the doctors love to prescribe that particular statin. The statin drug is really, really good at lowering inflammation. So it does help to a degree at first, but the problem is it increases something called LDL-B, and LDL-B has been linked with cardiovascular disease. So it's actually raising cholesterol that we don't want potentially.
Wow.
And when we go to the doctor, they do that lipid panel test. They're testing LDL, HDL. They say HDL is good, LDL is bad, and there's VLDL on the test tube. So, but this is a very outdated way to test cholesterol. I think it hasn't been updated since the 60s, and we have since
Okay.
identified 13 different subtypes of cholesterol. And what
Okay.
we do know is that when we take saturated fat, the saturated fat, like coconut oil, for instance, is more stable. That's why when it's in room temperature, it's clumping up, and then when
Okay.
it's too warm, then it starts to liquefy. So when we cook with something like that in high heat, the saturated fat is stable. It doesn't turn into a toxin. When we use an unsaturated fat cooking oil, for instance, vegetable oil, canola oil, something like a grapeseed oil, we start cooking that in high heat, it turns into a toxin. So saturated fat's actually more beneficial to us in that instance. And
Mhm.
saturated fat does raise cholesterol, and that's why it's given a lot of criticism. But it raises the parts of HDL that's helpful, and it raises the parts of LDL that's helpful. So that's why in certain Caribbean countries where they consume a lot of coconut, or in certain Southeast Asian countries where they do consume coconut, they have less instance of heart disease.
Right.
So I think it's important that we focus on what the actual cause is. So the attention has been shifted from sugar to saturated fat
Right.
and cholesterol.
Yes, when in actuality, the
Mm.
sugar also plays a role.
Right, it's sugar and trans fat that's really causing all these problems. It's not the saturated fat. It's not necessarily the cholesterol, because I think there is not enough education on what cholesterol is and what we need cholesterol for in the body. 80% of our brain is comprised of cholesterol. We need it to produce certain types of hormones. The fatty myelin sheath that covers our nerves, one fifth of the fatty myelin sheath is cholesterol, and we need that to function.
That is very interesting. Now, in your opinion, are there particular groups, for instance, children, low income populations, who you would say are more vulnerable to sugar addiction?
I think so. I think it's easy to market products to certain communities, and it's less expensive to purchase. So lower income community may buy more of these things and give it to their children. And
Mhm.
we can see it. I mean, certain products that are used in the inner cities, if you look at the advertisements in the inner cities, they're usually certain products, and there's a lot of sugar in those products.
That is so true. And sometimes I feel like in some of these communities, they are food deserts where they really don't have access to fresh produce or grocery stores with fresh produce, if they would have a grocery store at all. And I
Yeah.
believe that when it comes to children, it starts from home, but at the end of the day, in our schools too, because you could be doing everything you can at home, but if at school, what is given to them is not, especially if they eat lunch at school, which I would say 90% of the population who go to public school, they eat lunch at school. If it's not, the right nutrition is not being furnished to them, it can be very difficult. And in low income communities, of course, they are not going to be giving them fresh produce and the healthy things for lunch or for breakfast. It's going to be the apple juices and the canned items and all the bottled and canned things with all the preservatives and the toxins, which is pretty sad. But unfortunately, that is our reality. What strategies do you think could help prevent sugar addiction in society?
Awareness is probably the key, and then we have to make a conscious effort to avoid sugar. I think that for my wife and I, we make a conscious effort to avoid sugar because we want her to get better. So I think we need some kind of motivation,
Mhm.
and unfortunately for us, the motivation was a diagnosis, cancer diagnosis. But do we need to wait till we get high blood pressure, we get diabetes, we get cardiovascular disease, we get cancer or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's before we say, you know what, we should really start to think about a healthier lifestyle? I think we need to start sooner and earlier, because if we want to prevent disease, we can start right now, today.
That's right. And I would add that our food industry needs to do better. Unfortunately, it's going to be a journey or a long time coming, but during the time when they are figuring it out, you can decide to take a step and make a change for your own self. Yes, we are not saying it's going to be a breeze or it's going to be easy, but nothing good comes easy. If you want anything good, you have to be willing to work for it and fight for it. So I think that the change would start from us, and it starts now. Because, like you said, Juan, you don't have to wait to get to the point where you have diabetes or high blood pressure or have cancer before you make a change. And unfortunately, for some of us, that is what it had to take. And that's why we are choosing to speak up, because
Yeah.
it's very seldom talked about. Juan, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.